Thunder Grunt.
Hey guys!
Bob!
Hey, Bob.
Welcome to Writers Blockbusters, the show that treats the final edit of a movie like the script. Today we're going to introduce ourselves first.
I am Jimmy George. I am a full-time screenwriter and full-time script consultant. My Twitter handle is @JimmyRGeorge.
I'm Jamie Nash. I am a screenwriter. I am the author of Save the Cat Writes for TV, and my Twitter handle is @Jamie_Nash.
And I'm Bob Rose. I'm the everyman of this show. and my Twitter handle is @ThunderGruntBob. And today we're going to talk about that Marvel movie that was supposed to come out before the world went to hell. We're going to talk about Black Widow, guys. I can see the excitement on your faces.
No.
I thought it was Loki we were talking
Oh yeah,
about.
let's talk. Yeah. You know what?
One
Loki,
day we'll get there.
We could talk about Loki as a movie because it basically, in my opinion, was. It's like, here's a movie plus another hour. You know.
I still haven't seen any of
Okay.
the MCU on TV.
Gotcha.
I'm behind.
So Black Widow. Let's start off with the obvious. Jamie, who wrote this shit?
Who wrote it? A guy named Eric Pearson. Eric Pearson has written other exciting movies, such as, let me look him up. Godzilla versus Kong.
Okay, wow.
Pokemon Detective Pikachu.
Damn, he's the big budget guy, huh?
Uncredited script doctor on Avengers Endgame and Avengers Infinity War. I wonder how he got that on IMDb, because that's not a real credit. That's like, did he sneak that on there, or did somebody else?
Probably some fanboy popped it on there.
He was in the room for like a day, and he just said, "What if they did this?" And then he added it on IMDb himself.
So other things: Pacific Rim Uprising, Thor Ragnarok, Spider-Man: Homecoming, Ant-Man, Marvel
Jesus.
One Shot, etc., etc., etc.
So the guy's worked.
So-
He's worked.
Yeah,
The
there are-
guy has been making movies writing movies like this for
Yeah.
a while.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are two story by people, which I find interesting. Jack Schaefer and Ned Benson.
Okay.
Are they the ones who created the character?
No, I don't think
It's not
so.
character by, it's story by, not character by. So
Yeah, it's a story by. So they must have done some initial stuff. So Jack Schaefer is a WandaVision writer. I didn't look up.
So they're part of the MCU brain trust, essentially.
yeah.
Yeah. So they
That
must
makes
have done some early draft, and they used some pieces of their general story, but not the actual script. Yep. So yeah, and it looks like the disappearance of Eleanor Rigby is the other thing.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that. I remember that.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. They're the Raiders.
Well, okay. So this guy he's a Marvel. He's like a Marvel
Regular.
Regular.
I mean,
yeah, he's
he
a
did
pillar of
Homecoming.
Marvel
He was
writing.
the co-writer on Homecoming. Okay. So
He's like a Marvel
I guess-
careerist.
And that makes sense too. I guess when you're gonna go back and make a movie that takes place inside your franchise at a different point, you need somebody who knows the shit, right?
and has been involved in crafting all those little,
Right.
connective fibers.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
By the way, this is the second week the movie's been out. It's made 232 million ducats, bitcoins, whatever.
Does that number just
8
include? Is that just theaters, or is that like Disney Plus?
That's just theaters worldwide.
And
Wow,
that's not
worldwide.
even the Disney premiere. I remember seeing the first week it was 60 million, right?
Yes.
Through just through Disney Plus, and they just got $30 from me.
Now there has been a lot of controversy. The second week was a massive drop off, like a historic drop off, and they blame the theaters are blaming that on Disney Plus.
No. There is one thing to blame here, gents, and that is Space Jam.
Yeah.
I thought for sure Bob was gonna try to get us to do Space Jam.
Oh no!
The original.
I wouldn't do that to you. There's nothing to talk about, but I just wanted to
Nobody
mention.
said anything about defense.
I'm pretty sure that the drop off definitely had to do with Space Jam.
Agreed. At least in my house, I've been. That's been a repeat viewing nonstop. No.
I just want to announce that me and Jamie are writing Space Jam 3 right now. So.
Yeah,
right.
Big news.
Big news. Right.
Big breaking. Space Jam meets the Globetrotters.
Oh,
That would actually be kind of amazing.
Yes.
All right, so we know where it came from, but the one thing about this movie that's obviously kind of different from other Marvel movies is how it starts. The prologue is rather beefy. Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah, you know what it reminded me of? Like when I was a kid, when I read comics, I never had the origin story in the comic, but like, 5 issues in, they give you the origin story or something in like a montage or something, or they do some weird thing. That's kind of what this reminded me of, is like the story's not really about the origin story, but they have to like give you a really condensed origin story sort of in order to get to the rest of the story.
It's a character who I was going to say we have part of her origin story already in a franchise, which was Age of Ultron. Remember, because they showed her like her kind of beginnings, and I wonder how much they had to jigsaw puzzle all of it in.
Right.
Right. I don't know if you guys even remember that, but
no, I do remember that. Yeah. For me, it was I didn't track. Jamie couldn't remember if we were even doing this podcast today.
No, I couldn't.
After he saw the movie, is this what we're doing?
Getting ready to watch Space Jam.
Jamie watched Space Jam twice for this episode.
That's right.
That scene with LeBron. No, but so I didn't break down the things that need fixing, but for me, it felt almost like the first act. It operated like a before world. It was sort of like we know so much about Natasha. The storytellers are assuming you have a lot to go upon coming into this about Natasha. We know how she dies. We know the various major things that happened into her life, but we know very little about what happened before we met her in the MCU. So like we pretty much got a lot of the things that need fixing in that childhood prologue about her family problems and her, so it was very effective in that way. I can't remember many prologues that sort of do the job of a first act. For me, it worked that way. It was effective.
I was going to say, if Marvel's good at anything, it's kind of like planning ahead. And if you think about all of her arc stuff in Endgame, where she like almost cries eating that sandwich, talking about how she lost her family. I was like, man, they like then showing this prologue. I was like, this really all it works.
Right. Absolutely.
If you're a part of it, if you've been a fan of this whole thing, like they actually kind of retroactively it fits, and this also this works as part of her story better than I would have guessed.
Me too.
I thought it would be retconned way more,
Yeah. Me too. I was expecting things that didn't track, that didn't feel honest.
Yeah.
Based on everything else.
One story it did remind me of was Guardians of the Galaxy, because it has it has that prologue when he's a kid, and then it kind of has to reframe what that means in the current context to give them things that need fixing ordinary life, but it does it super quick. And that's what this reminded me of a little bit.
And it also gives us it also does a few setups in this whole thing.
Yeah,
right?
That's what I mean. They plant a lot of seeds in that prologue that really you don't typically see in the prologues that
even down to Natasha coloring her hair.
Yeah.
So often.
Yeah, she's got hair dye. Yeah.
She's got hair dye, right. Yeah.
It's sort of weird because the prologue then goes and does the thing where it has that montage through the credits that does a lot of the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
I just laughed only because we're talking about Space Jam, and Space Jam does the same thing.
Does it really? Hey man, that's great crap. I mean, I put this on the list to talk about because I fucking love when movies do this. And I think like a lot of screenwriting, a lot of scripts I read waste that time. They just like say insert titles and start credits, end credits. When, you know, artfully, I mean, my favorite example of that, if you're interested, is The Fugitive. If you look up The Fugitive script, I mean, the credits are written on the page, each individual credit. It's like next credit, and the story is told through the credit sequence. And I thought this was a great example of they really like bridge the gap between that prologue that we saw and Natasha of the timeline that we're about to experience very well. And we learned a lot of information about the world and, you know, Natasha and Yelena and what happened to them and what they experienced. And they put a face on the stakes of the widows themselves in the Red Room. So they like sort of gave us everything we needed to know about the story world in that credit sequence, and not a word was uttered.
It's sort of like the prologue's the beginning of Natasha, and then the credits at the beginning of the plot.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. I mean, that's yeah.
That's well said. Yeah. But I bet that was scripted. I bet those.
Yeah, definitely.
I bet those images. I bet that wasn't created in the editing room. I bet those images were all crafted in the script. I wish we could have gotten our hands on the script. I know MCUs aren't always easy to get.
They're impossible to get. There's a couple of them out there, like Iron Man's out there, maybe a couple other things.
But
Endgame is out.
They released them way after the fact, and they're probably edited to the movie, right?
Absolutely.
Some of the ones that they're trying to get an Oscar for get released.
Yeah, so they're like it says on the cover for your consideration. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this script that we've adapted, that we've adjusted to make it perfect.
It's funny. I'm writing a television pilot right now, and it's a non-premise pilot. If you buy my book, Save the Cat Writes for TV.
There it is.
So a non-premise pilot is a pilot that isn't an origin story. It feels like a first episode, right? And what this reminds me of, sort of, is like back in the day of Gilligan's Island and the Brady Bunch, where the origin story would be in the credits. You know, it would just be like a 3-hour tour, you know, and then you could go and watch the episode. So you've given the example of the Johnny Quest before.
Johnny Quest. The Johnny Quest credits tells the whole premise and the backstory. Yeah.
The Johnny Quest is a little different because it's less of an origin story and more just like a trailer for Johnny Quest. like it feels like this is all the cool types of things you'll see in Johnny Quest. You'll see laser guns and giant snakes and, you know, mummies and all kinds of stuff. So this always reminds me of that. And I know I'm doing something similar where it's probably going to have a song during the credits. So I might have to look up The Fugitive and see how they laid it out.
Yeah, it's very instructive. They lay it all out on the page, and it reflects the movie almost to a T. Like, so.
Okay, cool.
We're assuming something similar happened here. Like it's a fully written sequence.
We're basing our comments on the assumption that those things happen.
Right.
Who knows? You know, maybe I'm totally wrong.
And honestly, like with this prologue, because what it does, and it's like my next question, it pushes the movie back a little bit. Like the things that normally you'd expect to hit at a certain time all get pushed back. So everything gets condensed. So if you didn't do this during a quick credit sequence, which everybody expects, you'd have to do like another sequence or something to even show, or you'd have to skip it and like backfill the information in.
All that stuff would be planted throughout the movie that we saw in the prologue. Yeah.
You have a flashback scene later in the movie that just covers the whole thing.
Yeah.
And this movie already has a lot of things it has to backfill already. So it already has a lot of baggage because the whole escape from the Red Room and blowing up her old boss and the kid and all that stuff, all that has to be backfilled already. Mm-hmm. And, you know, that's enough work to be
exactly.
They have enough baggage
and enough for the audience to keep track of.
Right. And that's what, when I was watching this movie, I was like, how would you even define like the catalyst of this movie?
Yeah.
I think I have an opinion on where the lock-in kind of
Well,
happens,
obviously it was in Civil War. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, not in this.
It's not in this movie. It's Civil War.
So
Do you want to explain the lock-in real quick?
Yeah,
Jamie,
you want to explain
for
what it
anyone who
is?
hasn't
Yeah,
listened before?
Yeah, sure. And I'll kind of put it in context because we have the prologue. So I'm automatically discounting that as being part of this. It's almost like this is the backstory you need to know to understand the rest of the movie.
Now
to
the
make
movie
it cathartic.
Yeah.
Now the credit sequence hits and the actual story we're going to tell here begins. So kind of like a James Bond, movie that has a little his last adventure and then the next thing. Even though this one it actually pays off the origin story.
Yeah.
So the catalyst or inciting incident, just super quick, that's the kind of sudden event that kicks off the story we're telling. It's the random event. It's the person struck by lightning. It's the message, the mission they get, invitation or something. And the lock-in is when the hero chooses to go on the mission, so to speak, or they choose a goal. There's obstacles in the way, but they choose a goal. They make a decision. They go on that thing. Obstacles in the way, but there's great stakes pushing them to go and face the obstacle and win the day. So that's the lock-in moment, is when all of that comes together and the hero is doing the thing that the premise promises they'll do. So if it's Indiana Jones, he is on the hunt for the lost ark. If it's James Bond, he's on the hunt to bring down Blofeld or somebody.
Yeah.
If it's a rom-com, rom-coms are a little weird because sometimes they're fighting to get away from each other. Or they have another mission, but they're going to fall in love anyway.
During the course of it,
If it's a mystery, we know, Clarice Starling has to work with Hannibal Lecter to bring down, Buffalo Bill or something. It's
typically where the movie that the audience came to see kicks into gear. Kicks into gear.
That's right.
Now I'm can I guess where you guys are thinking this?
There's lots of
because I think the catalyst is pretty obvious. I was joking about Civil War, but for this specific movie, would it not be the bridge sequence with Taskmaster? The second her car blows up, that's the catalyst.
So I wanted to ask you guys, this brings into play something we've debated about in previous episodes. In previous episodes, we've talked about what defines the lock-in, when the audience knows the problem that the character has to overcome by the story's end, or when the character gains awareness. Because like the audience knows that Marty is in 1955 10 minutes before Marty does. And the audience knows that Phil is stuck in the same day in Punxsutawney 10 minutes before Phil does. And in this movie, 21 minutes in, we learn about the big problem, the gas agent.
The gas thing, right.
15 minutes before Natasha does. So that's my question.
So you think that once we learn what the gas does and how it works, you're saying that's the catalyst for the audience, kind of?
Yeah, that's my question for you guys. Because they say Taskmaster protocol is activated. We don't know what the fuck that means, but it feels important.
Yeah.
My take on it is when something happens to the hero, because those things never would necessarily have to intersect, right?
Right.
So there's part of me that, and this was a debate I was having with myself while I was watching the movie. I was like, what would I consider the catalyst in this movie? And I'll explain to you why this kind of semantics is kind of a good discussion to be having with yourself too during a movie. Was it when Natasha got that suitcase? Like I got this from Budapest or whatever.
Right.
And we see,
because in most movies, that's what it would be. If you got the magic item, the magic lamp or something, and it was delivered to your house, that would be the kind of the catalyst. It'd be like, okay, there's this catalyst. What is this? Now the question is, it might be her rubbing the lamp. It might be the genie popping out. Might be the catalyst. Because if she never opens that box, she never knows it's magic. She's just like, oh, it's magic. It's a box, you know? So that's why Taskmaster might be the thing that elevates it. Oh, this is important. You know, so it might be a double bump catalyst.
Double bump, like you've talked about. Yeah. So it's two things that happen simultaneously.
So she needs like here's a thing, and then she needs something to say, oh, this is very serious. This somebody
like
wants
you said,
this. Yeah,
Bob,
right.
like you pointed to, Bob, on the bridge. So we're saying the bridge when she's
when
like,
her car
you're not here
explodes.
for me, you're here for that. Okay.
In much simpler terms, when she knows that somebody really wants something she has.
Yeah. And even though she doesn't know what it is, we know what it is. So, I mean, there's a lot. Like, I didn't put this on the list of topics, but there's a lot of perspective shifting in this movie where they play with.
It's a spy movie.
Like,
that's
we've got
right?
we've got a lot of superior position over her for a lot of the movie, and then the movie gives them plays with us like we have superior position and we don't. We can talk about that later.
It does.
So would
the catalyst thing. The weird thing about it. So then she gets those things, but the other way, you know, and honestly, I think that's what it is. I think it's a double bump catalyst where you need both things to get her story in motion. So the example I would give is Jaws, right? We know Jaws. We know the shark's there. We know he killed, you know, in the very first scene of Jaws, we know he kills, I call Bruce kills Chrissy, and she's dead. But the story doesn't kick in for the hero's story. The hero's ordinary life, Brody, doesn't change until he finds the body on the beach.
Right, that's true. That's good. That's a good way to articulate it.
Yeah, so the other way, and this is honestly I could see somebody debating it this way, though I do think it's ScarJo's movie. I think it's her movie. It's her POV. Yeah. You could argue that her sister's story, she has her own catalyst where she's, you know, gets the gas and she's awoke for the first time.
Yep.
So if you are following her story, that's kind of a catalyst as well. And it really just depends on how you skin it. And these things work better. Again, like I always say, these things work better pulling a story out of you, not analyzing.
Right.
And the good news I always say about catalysts, if you're debating that, it's better to have too many than too few. Because as long as things are happening in your story, that's what a catalyst really needs. If you have like 3 things that happen that are kind of the catalyst, well, it might get a little busy. And this movie at times feels a little busy.
It does, yeah.
It's very.
That's the only negative. But I'd rather be busy than dormant. So I think you actually have a good problem if you're writing a story and you're like, I have 3 like really cool things that happen, and they all need to happen. But you know, which one's the catalyst? You know, I don't think it matters too much. You know, as long as it's there.
It means they're happening, and that's good. You want things to happen in your story.
Jimmy, say that again. You broke up.
It means if you have too many catalysts, at least it means lots of things are happening.
Yeah.
Which you want. That's what you want. I wanted to ask you. So Jamie and Bob, we're all kind of agreeing now that like the bridge fight where she sees that he's after the case is the lock-in. Is that what you're saying? I think
the catalyst. That's the catalyst.
Okay.
I think the lock-in's something else.
Okay.
Yeah, let's talk about the lock-in then.
Yeah. Okay.
What do you think the lock-in is? Jimmy, did you have one? It sounded like you were building up.
Well, no, so I was asking. I mean, they're so like they're really loose, right?
It's a little busy again.
It's very busy. I have my own thoughts, but
like okay, so she learns when she goes back to Budapest, to the place in Budapest where she used to live. She learns from her sister what the vials are. And she learns that she's told that Dreykov is still alive and that the Red Room is still active, that she thought she had destroyed and saved all these women from slavery. And
to me, that's the lock-in.
But it's almost like there's like a refusal of the call there simultaneously though, because she doesn't believe it's true.
Right.
And sort of we get the call and the refusal simultaneously in the same like fucking sentence, which is weird. Here's the problem you have to fix, and she's like, no, it's not a problem, I already fixed it, I'm good.
Well, I think it is truly a debate kind of thing.
Yeah,
it's like,
right
it's
in
like,
that
you
moment.
know, working out what the actual mission is between the two of them, kind of in some ways.
So that's this brings up a good little topic. So that's, you were saying, you know, like the 16-minute prologue like gets the movie like a late start. But a lot of times you see in these screenwriting books that, you know, we've talked about at length, you know, use it if it works for you, leave the rest, right? But you see some people who are sort of like obsessed. I'm talking about writers, not like writers who are like worried that their end of Act 1 has to take place on page 25, right? They're like religiously, I have to meet this number. But, you know, we're really talking about like percentages if you really want to talk about numbers that work well for the story. And it doesn't have to be exact. And that moment where Natasha learns about the vials and about Dreykov still being alive in the Red Room, that's 34 minutes. So you would think that would be late, but it's actually 25% into the movie. Like the movie's 2 hours and 14 minutes long. So it's actually like it's like the editors were like, we gotta get it at the 25% mark for this audience expectation who comes in watching these MCU arc plot movies. So even though it feels long, it's actually like right on schedule with your standard arc plot cheeseburger experience.
Yeah, and being so busy, it doesn't feel long at all. It's like you watched all this action and all this other things happening. Things are, you know, every scene's in a different location, and it's moving so fast.
And all over the world too. It's like
all over the world.
Not even just like a different location, different country.
I was even gonna say, like, there's some action I think it's not functioning as story really, kind of.
Yeah.
But it's fine. You know, it's a Marvel movie.
Bam! Whiz!
I mean, like, I get the metaphor, but I don't even know if I needed to see the sisters fight. It's a cool fight. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I think them fighting is kind of odd. Why wouldn't they talk? I don't understand.
Well, it's good premise delivery, man.
It is.
I mean, that's a whiteboard that goes in the trailer. You gotta have that.
But there is the part of me that's like, they would say more to each other.
Yeah, I know.
With words first before fighting.
Almost choking each other to death.
Right.
Hey, how are you? I'm good.
Remember we were sisters?
You're taller than me now.
Right, but so are we saying that, to get a clear answer, even though we don't have one, the lock-in is when is it when they know that they have to find out where the Red Room is?
I actually, and I don't remember, I only saw the movie once. You guys both watched
I watched it this
time.
morning, literally.
So maybe you can help clarify.
Yeah.
In my head, I have it loosely that maybe when they decide to join forces to go to the next step, that would be a true lock-in.
And ready for how late that happens?
Yeah.
That is 52 minutes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So for me, I have it much later. And it's kind of the Indiana Jones, we're partners kind of thing, where we already sort of know.
That's when they're going, yeah.
Yeah, and then it was like, okay, let's go. We know the next step. Let's do it together. We're sisters, and boom, and they're all doing it.
So.
But again, I think
also
this movie has so many things that happen that it covers it. It allows for the late lock-in.
I was gonna say also, like, if you want to argue that a lock-in has a tactile feel, them going to, like, I know someone who knows the information. Let's go.
Get the helicopter to start the process.
That's the tactile feeling of a lock-in. Like, all right, the mission's on. All right.
So it's interesting, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't do a log line for this one, but if I did, it probably would be something like Natasha has to join forces with her assassin younger sister to go on a quest to destroy the Red Room that built them or something.
And the guy who controls them and was controlling that.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So in that movie, that lock in to overcome that problem is at 52 minutes. So
52 minutes. 52 minutes is when the chase is on, and as we know, every chase has something that's being chased, and what's being chased is a thing called a MacGuffin, which is a word that I think a lot of people know, but I don't know if everyone knows what a MacGuffin is. One of you guys want to define what a MacGuffin is?
Go for it, Jamie, and I'll bounce off of you.
Sure. So a MacGuffin is simply a thing, and really it's thing in quotes. It could be anything that is being chased through the movie. It's kind of like the football that's being chased. It's usually an item. It's like I don't know why Tarantino's briefcase always comes to it, but
it's the one,
or it's the Holy Grail in Last Crusade. I mean,
the Holy Grail in Last Crusade,
Mm-hmm.
the Lost Ark, the Maltese Falcon, whatever. That's and Hitchcock gave it the name, and he gave it the silly name called MacGuffin, just as like to say it could be anything. It's like a substitute word that you could put in, like we have the MacGuffin, and then
I think if you listen to our Rise of Skywalker episode, we talk at length about the problem with MacGuffins. Like that movie is very heavy on MacGuffins.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
I remember the Spider-Man Inside the Spider-Verse, like they even comment, they have their own word for it. It's a goober or something.
Yeah, the goober.
The goober. Like they came up with their own word for it. They were like, yeah, there's always a goober, a thing.
A thing is something. Right.
Yeah, and the MCU loves their MacGuffins. I mean, we've done so many episodes.
The Infinity Stones are literally
each
MacGuffins.
one of them, and the gauntlet itself is a MacGuffin.
They're all MacGuffins, right?
MacGuffin upon MacGuffin upon MacGuffin.
One thing this brings up for me, though, the MacGuffin is sort of forgotten about in this movie.
Yes.
It's not that important. It's in the very beginning, but then they're on a quest. To me, this movie changes Blake Snyder genres many times.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it starts out almost like a dude with a problem kind of story, like an innocent person swept into a situation and they have a battle for survival. And then it becomes a Golden Fleece story. We're going to quest to bring down the dragon and kill the dragon. And it's a buddy love movie. It's a guy and a girl and kind of thing. It seems to go through some shifts to me that almost felt television-like in some ways.
And they each are their own mini movie in that way.
Yeah, it's like a bunch of mini movies that it kind of shifts from thing to thing. So
I wanted to bring up the MacGuffins because I wanted to say, like, this was interesting in that they never really lost the MacGuffin once she gets it. Like, and it's the villains want the MacGuffin. The villains know it exists, but it's weird compared to the other Marvel movies that we've seen where the MacGuffins usually bounce back and forth with who has possession of them
during a fight scene or something. Even.
Yeah. It's like they never lose it. And then would you consider the Red Room its own MacGuffin? Like it's like that's like object they're trying. It's a setting, but it's the mysterious thing that it's the Ark. So.
Yeah, it definitely takes a backseat because, like, once we learn the technology of the MacGuffin exists, I think the audience is even like, well, they can probably just replicate it later. So I'm not that worried about this singular amount of MacGuffin because the MacGuffin is actually kind of a mixture of chemicals or something. It's a formula.
It's not like the Infinity Stone or something.
Right.
Where there's only one, and you have to have it.
Right.
What was the first Avengers? The first Avengers cube.
The cube is an Infinity Stone, but it's
it was one of the stones. There was a name for it. I wanted to bring it up because I feel like it's a technique that's used. That if you're gonna make a MacGuffin movie, you have to be thinking about these things, and this one sort of, like Jamie said, forgets about it. It's kind of like they get it too soon, and they never put the MacGuffin at stake really. Like they sort of have it in their possession, and we're never really worried about them losing it for the rest of the movie.
Well, even the movie itself at the very end admits that here's the last vial, just replicate it. It's like it's like, okay, so it really was never about that like little storage of MacGuffin that they had. So,
they
kind of, it was kind of a lame duck MacGuffin.
Right. Lame duck MacGuffin.
Yeah. I would even say that's kind of one of the issues with this movie is because it is so busy. Like, I don't know that I felt the cathartic landing of freeing the Black Widows. Like, I didn't go, the Black Widows are free. I was just like, bunch of weird women practicing karate, or cool now. I don't know. But it's
Gotcha. Okay.
I think this movie goes in lots of, and we'll get to that in the next topic, which is
Are you saying, like, Jamie, just help me understand a little bit, like, are you, because I think I got what you're saying, but you're saying, like, maybe the lock-in should have been Natasha seeing footage of all the horrors wrought by the Black Widows in her absence or ever since, and that's the lock-in, that the MacGuffin doesn't exist. It's her stopping that.
And the movie tries to do that moment,
it does,
Bob,
it does.
where she that one widow.
But later
on,
right?
Yeah.
I think that's my problem. The movie is battling a couple different movies. It's battling the sister movie, it's battling the family movie, and it's battling the free the oppressed movie
from mind control.
From mind control. And I'm not sure that it's best to do all those things at once, is what I'm saying. I think each one got cut a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So none of them landed as great as I think. I think there's a good movie in each one of those, and I think smushing them all together takes a little bit away from each of those storylines.
I think also, like, I wrote down for us here, but I think that what you just said, Jamie, is probably a symptom of this problem. Writing both a sequel and a prequel at the same time, and knowing the character's fate prior in another movie, like, maybe that's one of the reason it all gets jumbled into three different concepts being smushed together, because they kind of don't know where to go, even though they know exactly where it goes. Wait, how do you tell the story?
I think it's similar to a different problem or a different symptom, but shows the same problem, is the old Batman movies or Spider-Man movies where they put too many villains in at once, and everything gets a little like, okay, you pick one and go with it, streamline it.
We talked about this in the Rise of Skywalker, and I don't want to compare this to that because I really enjoyed this movie.
I like this one too. I'm not really bagging on it.
We didn't really start with that, but I enjoyed it too. Like, we're not hating on this thing.
Yeah, we're just talking about the craft, right?
Yeah,
we're talking about the craft. But when in doubt, consolidate, right? But this is the MCU. They're trying to plant as many new branches to go out into. They're trying to pass the baton to Yelena and possibly do things with the Red Commander or whatever his name is.
Red Guardian.
The Red Guardian, and I got his name wrong. That character would be very pissed at me. But it's Red Guardian. So I get why they made the choices that they made from a MCU storytelling standpoint, but I agree, Jamie, it really diminished each of those things they were trying to do by trying to do so much.
Well, Jamie has the point. It feels like television. This could have been a series, right?
So imagine if it was a series. I think it would have been a really strong series. I think this would have been a really strong series, because, like, something that felt rushed to me, like, I love the family coming together, felt Incredibles to me or something when they're flying, they're all together. I think that could have been, you could have given it enough time with just one episode of, like, the family back together, and then one episode of the family working together in a series, and that would have been enough. And that would only be like 20% of your story, so you'd have time to do an episode with the sisters together. An episode, it felt more like a TV series.
It's funny to me because, as someone who watched Loki and was like, why isn't this a 90-minute movie? I'm realizing now that, because of what Jamie has just said, that this should have been the TV show.
How
Loki
much
should have been the movie.
Man, and talk about satisfying the Black Widow fans. Like, that would have been...
I mean,
this has nothing to do with screenwriting.
This has had to do with screenwriting, but we're also talking about a film that should have happened almost 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
We're not going to talk about all of that, but this is a movie that is kind of shoved in to a franchise that had already finished with the character. So that is a writing problem.
That's true.
Yeah.
And it's sort of the structure too. When I was breaking it down in my head, it reminded me a little sequence. When I start getting sequence method, I start feeling like maybe this should be in the TV show more than the feature or something.
Right.
the sequence method or the mini movie method is you sit down to do an outline. And I recommend this to some people, especially if you really don't like Save the Cat or you think it's too restrictive. And
it's
especially
rooting Hollywood, Jamie.
That's right. Or especially for the people who, if you've made short films and love to make short films, but want to make a feature, but don't know how to get your head around it, this might be a way to do it.
Just make 8 short films, right?
You make 8 short films that are all connected and like one feeds the next. So your first short film is about something and ends in some kind of cliffhanger, which throws to the next one, to the next one, to the next one. And that's kind of what this feels like to me. And some people write their movies that way. They write them in these 8 sequences.
That's exactly how I write my movies. I literally
said it because Jimmy taught me that method like years ago. That's what you told me.
I make and this is not something I made up or anything. This is, people do this all the time. This is, like you said, Indiana Jones was crafted this way, like a cereal.
I always forget who to give it credit to, because there's like 2 people that have sort of taken credit for the same thing. And one calls it the sequence method and the other calls it the mini movie method. They're both
saying the same thing. There's a great book for anyone listening who's interested in this and just learning about this. Paul Joseph Galino's The Sequence Method, and they break down 5 or 6 movies. They break down Toy Story, and they talk about how each 10-minute section of the movie is its own movie, and which is with its own central story question, its own goal, its own main antagonist, its own stakes, its own ticking clock mechanism, deadline to achieve the goal. So like it's like a 8 different story engines that you put them together, and each the end of one sequence is consequential to the main goal by story's end. So like, this thing gets Indy this much closer to the arc, right? The Staff of Ra and the, so yeah. It's in this movie, like you said, it feels like 8 movies. I didn't break down the sequences, but I agree with you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't break them down, but you can kind of see the prologue might be one, and maybe
the credits are one even. I mean,
it's its own, right? It's so true.
Then the next one could be to the bridge, and the next one could be to they team up to go on the mission, and then the next one could be saving the father from the prison, and then the next one could be the farmhouse. And then, so you could see how you could think of it as chunk.
Yeah, it's almost like in the case of these blockbusters, since this is the Blockbuster podcast, you brainstorm 8 big set pieces, major set pieces, and then you tell a story around that set piece.
And like 2 of them are characters just talking and doing story. And the rest have an action beat.
Yeah, it's, if you've ever had, I don't know if you ever do, brainstorm a television season. Sometimes I sit down and I brainstorm it that way, like episode 1, episode 2. And I just think of it high level, like this episode is about this thing. Second episode is about this thing. The third episode is about this thing. And it's very similar to what I do when I do sequence method.
And very similar to what's happening in this movie.
Right.
Yeah. Yes. That's why, to me, when I was watching it, I kept thinking, when I was breaking it down in my head, I was like, man, if I was breaking this down in my head, this would easily be a television show. And even tonally reminds me a little bit of Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
With same.
A buddy movie, and it's action, it's grounded, but Marvel kind of, inflated, it's all that kind of stuff.
You gotta force Jimmy to watch this stuff, so he knows what we're talking about.
I know, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Sounds good to me.
But in writing, I think the thing to emphasize too is in writing these chunks, you have to have a through line and a progression. Like, yes, you can make 8 short films, but they have to have an ongoing progression through all of them, especially with character. I think more so than even maybe plot, right?
I think that's probably
right. Yeah, and I was gonna say, how do you guys feel? I mean, just specifically right now, talking about Natasha, what do you feel her arc is in this movie? It's difficult, I think. It's really difficult.
I almost wonder, because the arc, like, how would she be different at the end of this movie than she was? We won't say at the beginning, but after the prologue, like that character she is after the prologue, would she do anything differently? I think she heals a bit. Like there's some healing there. Like especially when it comes to the fact that she killed the innocent person and some of those things.
Mhm.
But to me, I don't think she's really a different person. I think she's already matured into the person she is.
When we meet her, you meant.
The movie is therapy. The movie isn't her changing that much. I think she would do the same thing at the end as she would at the beginning, because we're kind of dealing with a fully formed character,
right?
For the most part, her morals and stuff are all in place. She knows who she is, right?
A throwback to last episode. Does she change the people around her? Does she change her sister? Does she change? I mean, her sister, in a weird sort of way, arcs as soon as she gets the antidote.
She
kind of becomes.
I was gonna say
a different person.
While watching it the second time too, I find it's an interesting character study too, because I feel like the mom and the dad both have like these Russian military values to life. Like, the dad literally looks at them as successes because they've killed so many people.
You have so much blood on your
you have so much. It's an incredible scene.
I am so proud.
Right. And the mom doesn't really care that much that she kind of aided and abetted human trafficking and murder for like her entire life. She's just kind of like, okay, yeah, I should probably do the right thing now. She's not really struggling with it.
It's a really loose growth.
But it's because they don't have like traditional values that we're used to being on screen, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the arcs are really odd.
I think
that.
Yelena is, like, for me, like, that's my favorite character in the movie, Yelena. But as far as like growth from a problem that like an internal thing that we see change by the story's end, I mean, it's more like she
quit her job.
Yeah,
it's not really like a huge
really.
There's
there's not much to track as far as like character growth and change from Yelena's side of the story. Even like, I'm a little confused about her plan. Like she gets the vials and then she mails them to to Natasha without an explanation, with just like a picture, and then when Natasha gets it and comes to her, it's like, why did you send him to me? She's like, well, I thought you were going to give it to Bruce Banner, and then Captain America was going to do the job. It's like, that's a fucking huge leap. Like, here's this box of glowing red stuff. Like, do the rest, figure it out. Like, it's a really dumb plan.
Write a note next time.
It goes to show, like, kind of in a weird way, like how her mom is like, it's a completely sexist plan too. Like, I sent it to you because I hoped you'd give it to all the dudes on the team and they would figure it out. Like, she didn't even think that Natasha
which defies who we're shown.
Right.
I have a problem with that, and whatever. It's fun. I
like the fact that Red Guardian at the dinner table admits that he's a simple man and he has no arc really. It's just
yeah. Well, he connects with his emotions more as the story unfolds. He shows his softer side, right? He gets soft. I mean, the mom is basically critiquing everybody about whether they've gotten soft. There's multiple lines about, oh, have you gotten soft? And like, pain makes you stronger is like a through line.
But I don't know if they changed. Like the side characters are more interesting than Natasha, sadly.
It's more like things that need fixing change, but like the person doesn't change. Like the relationships are healed, and she atones for the sin of killing or thinking she killed Taskmaster, Dreykov's daughter, and like things get fixed, but it's very much like the last episode with Legally Blonde. Like, things get fixed, but the character is in the end who she was in the beginning. Right? That's like
you're right, and
right?
it's an interesting play because they, like, I know you haven't watched it, Jimmy, but they kind of tackled it. They tackle it in the movies. Bucky is sort of a male Black Widow, right? Like, he was used and he was an assassin, and then eventually he was reformed.
It reminded me so much of Winter Soldier in that way.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, and I'm trying to figure out why Bucky feels like he has so much more of an arc in general, and Black Widow doesn't. I don't know if I have the answer right now for it, but he feels more substantial with change.
It could be because we maybe we see him more as the villain, where with her we haven't seen her.
We
really
don't see
We were
any
never
of that,
introduced to
right.
her. We were never introduced to her as evil.
And I actually think that was smart. Given that this is the last movie, like you don't want to just show her as a villain. So
that's what I'm saying though. Like maybe we would have benefited from a little bit of that,
from a lot of that. Yeah,
well,
yeah.
No, like we didn't really see. It's odd to me that our story through the credit sequence didn't have some shots of Natasha, like even stills of Natasha, like literally murdering people, and show what her life was, and where she came. You know, and then we know she joined the Avengers and became what she became. So it's odd to me that is not. That would feel like something. I think that would make it more.
Yeah, maybe if that we're rewriting the movie here, but if that prologue was showing her as a widow at the height of her being a villain, at the height of her being one of the greatest, killers in their program. That
amongst great killers, like she was the top. So
that might have shown us more growth. Yeah. That's probably it.
It's a hard question. It's a hard.
You guys hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, it's a weird one, but yeah, Natasha is. While you, Jamie, you argued it was through her lens. She's sadly kind of the least interesting character in the movie.
Yeah, it's a bummer.
It's a bummer. It is. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Not trying to shit on it. It's just because I think it's also like I said, we know. The audience inherently knows everything about her already. We know when she's going to die.
And how,
it's like this is just another stop on a road trip that we already took.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That's sorry not to be. We're not. I feel like we're shitting on it now. We're not,
no, I know. I enjoyed the movie.
Yeah. So did I. So you guys both had an interesting take on this, and I'm excited to hear it. The all is lost moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What,
Jamie? Go and I'll bounce off you, man.
Mm-hmm. So the all is lost moment in this movie. So most movies have this ultimate downer moment where it seems like the plan will never happen. Somebody dies. Somebody gets captured. The Ghostbusters end up in prison while all hell breaks loose, whatever. In this movie, there's a betrayal, a capture. That's very common. You see that a lot. You see the betrayal and the capture.
In spy thrillers, spy action thrillers, yeah.
Yeah. So they get captured, they get locked up. It seems like all is lost. It seems like they're not going to get. But then it's all a trick, right? It's all is lost, but not really. It's all a trick. So it's a weird thing. The all is lost really isn't all is lost at all. It's part of the plan. And the question is, aside from the logic issues I had with it, which there's a whole bunch of logic issues that throws up. What do you think about that? What do you think about all is lost not
Okay,
scenario?
I'll go on my little rant, and it's more like I want to discuss the pros and cons of making this choice as a writer. So, have you guys heard of the concept of the audience contract? Have you heard of that before?
No,
James?
I don't know that.
I haven't.
I don't know.
So I've heard many different explanation. We all have our different explanations for these terms and what they are. So the way that I define the audience contract. This is an arc plot movie, right? Jamie, you talk a lot about those there's three types of stories. There's your arc plot, which is your cheeseburger, which is Marvel movies, right? You have a hero with a goal and obstacles, and the hero is going to try to overcome those obstacles to achieve the goal by story's end. Then you have your mini plot, which is like your indie movies, right? Your Good Will Huntings and your weird ones, but they still
Star Wars, right?
Star Wars is an arc plot.
You think?
Yeah. Star Wars
sorry.
Wars
Solo.
So maybe I think Solo's still arc plot. I'm talking
okay. Never mind.
I'm talking like the
I'll stop.
indies. No, like I'm talking like
Once upon a time in America
Yeah,
in Hollywood. In Hollywood.
Yeah.
So they play around with they don't follow like a straight line to the end, and they play around and they do weird stuff, but they also do really commercial stuff.
Moonlight and Lady Bird and things like that.
Yeah. Many of the Oscar darlings are mini plot. And then you have your anti-plot, which is like your Finchians and your just experimental films
Hereditary
that like
and all that, right?
A little like a fly on a wall for 90 minutes is like your anti-plot. Like, this is art. And so with these arc plot movies, you have an audience contract that says, here is your hero, and you're going to experience whatever the hero experiences. When the hero learns something, you're going to learn something. When the hero makes a choice to do something, you're going to learn what that choice is and how they're trying to go about doing those things that they've decided upon doing. Everything the hero is doing, you are aligned with perspective-wise. That's how I define the audience contract. And
you mean the hero specifically, not just the protagonist?
Just the main character, whoever's the main perspective character.
Protagonist. Okay.
Yeah. And then, so I've talked about this in previous episodes. The opposite of that would be like in The Matrix, where Trinity goes into the room and she hears the Oracle tells her something, and we don't hear what the Oracle tells her. We don't know what she learned until the end. And if you did that with Neo, the audience would be pissed because it violates the contract we've made with them that you're going to experience whatever Neo experiences. For me, this twist is a cheat. It lies to the audience in a way that violates that. We're going to experience whatever Natasha experiences. If Natasha has a goal, we're going to know what that goal is. If Natasha feels something, we're going to know what she's feeling. If Natasha is scared of something, we're going to know what she's scared of. If Natasha is manipulating someone, we're going to know that Natasha is doing that because she's the main character. So so that's that. My feelings on this is it's a cheat because
I don't totally. I mean, I think in principle, what you're saying, totally. I think to do this, you have to have intent and know what you're doing, because I do think people can feel cheated. But I have a feeling there's a lot of good examples of this technique used too. Probably in heist movies, like in Ocean's 11, I could see some jazz music playing and then what really happened. And then you flash back and you see all the things that happened.
Guy Ritchie does that sometimes, where he'll show what happened right before a scene, during a scene,
Right. Yeah. I bet even like Mission Impossible might pull that when he pulls the mask off and, it's the big thing in the finale. So I think there's movies that use this well. I do think you're on dangerous ground. So for me, the big problem with This All Is Lost was that it presented not one, but two Deus Ex Machinas, in my opinion. So it literally cheated us of seeing real drama by just handing them solutions to problems that weren't problems. It's basically saying everything you think is a problem, not a problem.
They had the upper hand.
And to me, it did it twice. And that's what got on my nerves most about it. Like the first time I was okay with it. I pulled the mask off. I also feel like in storytelling, emotion isn't retroactive so much.
Exactly.
So I felt the All Is Lost when it happened. So later on, I didn't not feel the All Is Lost that already happened.
It's a rug pull and nothing more. It's just a rug pull. It's a Scooby-Doo.
Yeah. So the two Deus Ex Machinas, number one is that she was there and the one lady could the mother could just open the cage or whatever. So they're not trapped. That was Deus Ex Machina 1. But then when they got to number 2, it kind of started to bother me and made me think too much. So number 2 was, I know about the severed nerve. I already knew. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But if she already knew, there was so many problems, and these are more logic issues, like why not sever the nerve before you got there? Why have to punch yourself in the face or whatever she did? Why do that? Why not bring a gun and go outside and shoot him so you don't smell his pheromones? Why try to attack him and pretend like you don't know about his
why not put in nose plugs?
Why not put in nose plugs? There's so many things. There's so many problems I had with the double Deus Ex Machina.
So it made you start thinking and took you out of the story.
Well, at that point, I'm like, how many things could they have known before this plan to enact this plan if they were going to pull this plan anyway? Because now it appears like anything. Now the contract is totally severed. I get it because it's happened twice. One time, fool me once. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, or fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
Don't keep violating my contract, man.
Yeah. So for me, it was the double use of violating the contract. How I usually see this done is that's the twist, but the bad guy double twists you. I knew it the whole time. Pheromones. Yeah. And then they got to figure it out. So they're in the kind of sauce at that point. But in this one, I think when they doubled me up, I was just kind of like, okay, it was once okay, but twice not.
So I wanted to ask you guys 2 questions about this now that we've talked about it a little bit.
Right.
One, does it work despite our issues with it? So I'll start there. Does it work? And if so, why? Despite our issues.
I'm going to say no Jamie just laid it all out. I mean, I had the same. It made my brain go into overload of what was going on in that moment. Her smashing her own head into the table to sever the nerve. That is way dumber than an already not smart movie. It was, like the plan is bad. The plan is they have really great answers like perfect facial recognition technology. And then it goes into, I'll smash my head into the desk to sever the nerve.
Oh, man.
It didn't work.
For me, I was going to argue, despite my issues, that it worked.
Yeah.
And the reason being is that even though the details of the plan were a lie, the goal was the same.
Yeah.
So we knew what the goal was, which is to defeat Dreykov and
free the Black Widows.
Free the Black Widows, and all that remained honest and consistent. And so even though there was all this, misleading and lying to the audience, the storyteller, I still think it works, even though I have issues with it. So then my second. Go ahead.
It's a journey and a destination thing, right? Like,
yes, exactly.
I guess I'm saying the journey to the point.
You're like, the journey doesn't work.
The journey doesn't work. Yeah.
So, and that's a great answer. That I hadn't even thought of that being the problem that some people would feel, like you and Jamie are feeling. I'm feeling them too, but I'm trying to look at it from an instructive standpoint because. Go ahead, Jamie.
I feel like so for me, I think it could work because again. Emotion isn't retroactive, so I did feel the all is lost, and that's the important thing, right? So even though the all is lost wasn't an all is lost, that's okay. But the reason I don't think I think if you're pulling moves like this, they have to be the great moment that a Tom Cruise pulls off the mask. And this it was almost like the writers couldn't figure out how to pull this off, so they did some dumb thing. That's what it felt like to me. Like it was like they almost punted it immediately. Like it was like, okay, I know who you are. Your face is the other person.
It's almost akin to a filmmaking problem more than a script problem too. Like the execution of it, the build up to the face reveal is not there. It's kind of like, oh, by the way, see, my face isn't mine.
Yeah, and I was like, and like they even have an insecurity line from Alexei, because Alexei he's like, what is this? Like, what the heck? That's my terrible. I wasn't even going to try to do
Russian accent. I'm not even going to try.
I wasn't going to try. So Jamie, you sort of answered my second one, which is the pros and cons of making this making this choice as a writer. The pros and what the pros is what? A shock.
A shock.
And
a big
nothing
moment.
else. A big shock.
Yeah.
But the cons are they cheat. Like you get frustrated. You sort of takes you out. Like you said, emotion is not retroactive. So you're like, everything I just felt was a lie. Like I didn't need to feel those things because they were never in danger. Like you said, you didn't feel the authentic emotion of the moment.
Oh, see, I'm actually I feel that, not a pro, but I mean it the other way. I'm not meaning that as a negative. When I say emotion isn't retroactive, I mean, like, you can't take away the fact that I felt the all is lost.
Okay.
So you can get away with it.
Okay, you're saying that as a pro.
I wouldn't say it's a pro, but I wouldn't say that's why I'm not listing it as a con.
Okay.
Like, if you fake me in an all is lost, I still feel the all is lost in the all is lost moment. So I think it's okay to do that. However, your contract thing is the big part. I think you need to do it for a payoff. There has to be a big surprise. You have to hit me between the eyes. And then the fact that they did it that second time really bugged me. Like that's the part where you can't keep dipping into it, because they imagine if they did it 10 times, like, oh, well, we knew the thing was going to blow up, so we,
then it's a sketch.
Then
it's a sketch.
Yeah, it's like
it's a comedy sketch. Yeah.
Okay, cool. This was fun because it's a very unconventional choice for an MCU movie. I thought it was the most interesting thing in the movie, even though I wasn't crazy about it. But like, I was excited to talk about it because, like, go ahead, Bob.
I was gonna say, this is a weak argument, but Jimmy, you often talk about fulfilling genre expectations. To me, that's kind of what this idea came from, because
Absolutely.
Whenever I think of like a fake cyber tech mask that makes you look like somebody else, I think of spy movies. This is MCU's spy movie. It's almost like they had it on the whiteboard and they're like, where are we gonna jimmy this into the script?
Yeah.
Like a face full.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it fills the genre, but I almost don't feel like it fits in the movie.
I almost worry that in this case they didn't do anything to really freshen it up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We've seen it. Yeah.
It was just like, oh, that again. Okay. I mean,
and it's done, and like it's done so much better in other spy movies.
Yeah.
Like you said, Tom Cruise, even the first Charlie's Angels movie, the first reveal of the face being ripped off. Like, it's all done very like build up to the moment of the rip.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't have that.
I'm sure we've seen it with Mystique or Loki as well.
Yeah, right, exactly,
well. I mean,
right.
It's just we've seen it so many times.
I wanted to talk about it a little bit at length. I'm glad we did, because I read amateur scripts all day. That's my job, and I see a lot of the extreme of this, which is like an entire movie where we don't know. We're lied to about what the hero's goal and agenda is, and in the last minute, it's like, this whole thing was a lie. The main character knew what they were doing the whole time, and it was this other thing, and all the actions they were taking, they weren't really taking those actions. I just wanted you, the audience, to feel that way,
right?
Because it's cool and interesting, and aren't you surprised? And it's like, well, I feel nothing now, because everything.
Here's one more reason I'd put in the con list, and it's less related to this movie, because this movie, we've already said, doesn't have the great character arcs, but what it did, it robbed us of that final healing lesson learned bit that would normally happen at an all is lost moment. Yeah. So imagine if the mother really did betray the daughters and stuff. They'd have to work through that emotionally and get to wherever they're going to land by the end of the movie.
It almost would like fuel the mission, right? Like, we have to make sure that this regime goes down, and
Once again, I feel like the intention with the mother is too accurate to what her character in real life would be. As in, she is a cold, emotionless warrior at this point, or a scientist or whatever. And she's written like that, but it doesn't actually build on the character for us or make us feel anything. Like, I could actually believe she would be like that, and she would just be stone cold, and even betray her daughter in real life and be like, okay, I got a mission and I'm gonna get it done. I work for my country.
Just the way it works,
right? But it's not written for us. It's written for accuracy of like what that person would actually be like. So, I've been trying to do my best with transitions this whole time. But I don't know.
You're doing good, Bob.
Thanks.
Bob,
I gotta break the fourth wall. making a cliche fresh, we're talking about the actual ripping off face thing, right?
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
well, that is the cliche that I don't feel
Oh.
was fresh.
I can't tell if
I-
we already talked about something, hence why I'm asking.
I wanted to bring up some praise of this movie as like a great, easy to follow. So like a lot of my clients, my amateur screenwriting clients who are like just starting out, I work with a lot of people who's like their first or second script. So like they do a lot of things well, right? They write dialogue well, they make cool characters, they come up with really interesting scenarios and stuff, but like one thing that they can never grasp is just the simple concept of premise delivery and what it is to deliver on the promise of the premise. And like honestly, that is your job as a screenwriter from fade in to fade out. Above all else is to give us people, places, things, dialogue, scenarios that we could only experience in this story world that we're watching in no other movie. Because like I'll read these characters are great, this dialogue is great from these amateur screenplays, but I could see this character in any movie. I could see these scenes in any movie. I could hear this dialogue in any movie. It's not specific to the movie that the writer is trying to tell. So we use the phrase a lot in screenwriting, find the cliche, throw it away. And that's, I don't know who came up with it, but it's just a general phrase that if you have a cliche, your job as a screenwriter is to make it fresh. And I have an equation for this that's really simple. And it is, you take the cliche, if your scenario calls for this cliche moment or this generic trope, and then you combine it with your premise, your specific premise. So Natasha in Russia, and taking down the Red Room, and with her sister in Russia, and you use the premise to take that cliche and give us the version of that cliche that we could only see in this movie. So it's the line, can you say it in English? Which is, so Yelena's describing to Natasha what the gas is, right? So she says a bunch of science mumbo jumbo, and we've heard this in a million movies. She says it's a synthetic gas, the counter agent to chemical subjugation. The gas immunizes the brain's neuropathways, blah, 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 blah. And Natasha says, can you say this in English next time? And Yelena says it back to her in Russian. She gives her the response and the answer in Russian. And that is we've seen that scene so many times in English when a piece of science is being said to the audience and the writer knows the audience won't understand it. So the other character says, in English, please. And this time they have it response in Russian. And that is a version of that cliche that we could only see in this movie. So it's fresh, it's new, and if you plop it into any other movie, it doesn't work. But in this movie, it works. And that is like the essence of premise delivery. So I'm spending 5 minutes talking about a single dialogue exchange, but if you're trying to understand what premise delivery is, that line and that dialogue exchange is a perfect example of like what to do right. That's what I meant by making a cliche.
Sometimes it's steering into the cliches and
exactly
making them fresh again is really the key. And one thing I'd say about this movie, it reminds me a little of the Fast and the Furious movies in a weird sort of way. In this way,
family.
You know that better than anybody, I think.
Yeah, right.
Bob has a series of family videos out there. You have to check out on YouTube. But what it does is it takes kind of a standard grounded genre, but then elevates it in these crazy weird ways, like we have exploding floating airships or something like that. And you wouldn't see that in a Mission Impossible movie necessarily, or a James Bond or a Bourne Identity. But in this movie, you can expand things to this crazy heightened supernatural, like almost level. It's not supernatural, but almost science fiction-y kind of
science fiction-y. That's a good description. Yeah.
So they do that with this movie a lot too.
Yeah.
So you'd see the same fight you might see in the other movie, or the same car chase, but they can take it up a notch
and
give you some nutty stuff with
That's
it.
a good point.
You could also argue that the making the cliche fresh might actually play into the whole posing thing, where she's
absolutely.
She's kind of commenting on it. I mean, it's a fourth wall break sort of, but I think it also comes into play later where we actually, the audience is actually brought into the fact and it gives it new life, the posing thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, they're taking an MCU trope, right? And they're making it fresh. Like, they were like, are we going to have her pose all the time? What if we, like, make a joke out of it, right? Like, that's, yeah.
And then have her do it again, and then we you know.
Yeah, it's great.
It makes it fresh. It makes the posing fresh, right?
That's a good point, Bob. That's that same exercise with existing story material. Yeah.
Right. And so that also comes into play with touchstones, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're taking like regular basic objects and imbuing them with meaning that's special, so that when we see that same object in like reality, we associate it with this movie and these scenarios. So touchstones is something we haven't talked about in a while. William Martell's Blue Books, if anybody out there has never read them, they're like some of the best screenwriting instruction. They're like amazing books, and he's got some great articles if you just research William Martell touchstones and twitches. Jamie, twitches too, right?
Yeah, I think I can't remember. I remember all the crazy terms. He comes up with his own terms, like Popeye moments and this and that. I don't remember.
Yeah, he does. So basically, it's taking, like, you give the audience an object, and we're shown association, something visual with like a character's inner problem, and then every time that object reappears, it gives the audience a window without saying anything, without the character saying anything. We're shown like an emotional barometer of how the character is feeling about that problem when they're touching that object and they're doing something when that object reappears. And a lot of times these touchstones are used to track a character's like arc. How are they feeling now that they touch this object again? Like, we're midway through the movie. Are they growing away from this problem? Are they regressing and getting worse? And usually when the object appears, it gives the audience an easy way in to the character. And a lot of times the touchstones are used to track the progress of a relationship that's broken. And we just saw this in Mitchell's versus Machines, the wooden moose. Katie and her dad's broken father-daughter relationship. Every time the moose reappears, it's somewhere along the track of that relationship getting better. And we're seeing how Katie relates to the moose is different than the last time. We're seeing how the father relates to the moose is different than the last time. And the moose is used to show the audience how the relationship is growing. And this is a very like easy to learn from example of touchstones. We got the American Pie song, and that was like, I thought that was really cool, like and unconventional. It's even though there is a tape, like, it's kind of like, it doesn't have to be touchable, the touchstone, like it's sound. Even just sound works, like hearing something that we repeat, so that every time that song comes up, it's been imbued with meaning and we know what it means.
Also, using that song in a movie filled with, air travel crashes.
Oh my God. And just,
it's true.
Russia versus America. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, dude, I didn't even
there's
get
a lot of airplanes and helicopters and shit.
The dark layers of that, I didn't even get.
Yeah.
And then the sisters photo booth pics, that's a touchstone. So every time that photo comes up, we know it's specifically about like how Natasha and Yelena are feeling about their relationship. Mm-hmm. And then the fake family photo album is another great example. That has progressions. We see it multiple times in the movie, and then we learn that it's actually not a real photo album. It's a fake photo album that they made to help sell their fake family. And so it's just, these are three great examples of how to use a touchstone effectively with, like, they're on screen for maybe like 30 seconds total each in the movie, but they're very impactful.
What I was recently reading Pilar Alessandra's coffee break screenwriter book, and one of the exercises she had in that book, she's on the page screenwriting as her podcast, and she does consulting and things as well. But one of the exercises she had, which was really cool, was writing a bio, and I don't remember it. I didn't even prepare it for this, but it kind of makes sense, like with the touchdowns. It's like writing a bio by coming up with an object in your hero's life So you'll come up with an object. Let's say it's the moose from Mitchell's versus Machines, or and then you'll say, well, how does that? And then the next question is, how does that pay off in Act 2 or 3? How does that pay off later? So as you write your hero's bio, you can come up with these little questions, and then ask yourself, well, how does it pay off in the end? So you get a double bump out of it. It's not just like this object that's important that they stare at, the watch or something, this watch that means retirement. But then you're paying it off in Act 3 when the watch breaks and the person falls from the top of the tower or something like that. So it's challenging you to not only come up with a bio, but then to say how it pays off in Act 2 and 3. And I think that's a really cool exercise if you're going to write bios, because I'm not too big into writing like the bio, his favorites, my character's favorite Subway sandwich is the veggie delight on or something,
the tuna that isn't tuna.
Right. But I can see on the flip side, to turn that on its head, I could see doing that if I'm always challenging myself to say, how does that pay off in Act 2 and 3?
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
the Fireflies were the other thing.
Yeah, and the Fireflies.
Yeah, the Fireflies.
Yeah. They did a lot.
I wrongly brought up Solo earlier in this episode, but now I'm going to rightfully bring up Solo right now. Because in our Solo episode, I believe it's the first and best time we've ever talked about a certain technique with action, especially, which is the good news, bad news. Right, with all the action scenes in Solo having followed that Indiana Jones formula of up, down, good, bad. I think, you want to talk about it in this movie in the context of Black Widow?
Jamie, I'll let you set it up and then I'll keep going. I have the book report.
And it's another one that I'm sure William Martell hits in his book. I need to reread William Martell's book. But good news, bad news is just an up and down technique that can be used both to describe like your fun and games section, like scene wise, but usually it's used in an action sequence. So in an action sequence, it's like you pull a gun out. That's the good news. I have the upper hand. Then you pull the trigger. It's empty. That's the bad news. And it's like a cycling thing of good news, bad news. And it's really even more than good news, bad news. It's often good news, worse news, good news, really bad news.
Yeah.
And it keeps going like that. So it's an escalating series of good news, bad news techniques. If you find yourself writing action sequences that are just all good news, like he pulls a gun, he shoots, he kills, he turns around, he shoots another one, he kills, he kicks a guy in the face. And I read those all the time.
Me too,
and I'm like,
dude, me too.
I'm like, this person has either never seen an action movie or they're just kind of bored with action writing. They're just trying to get it. They're getting it over with. It honestly, I see that more often than the good news, bad news technique. So it's a common problem. So if you find yourself just doing this linear, takes care of the bad guy, takes care of the bad guy, takes care of the bad guy, next scene, you're in trouble and you need some good news, bad news technique. So here are some examples from Jimmy.
And we've even tracked it, like it works with all genres. So it works with romantic comedies, it works with drama, it works with whatever the scenario. If you're like, okay, how do I get from the beginning of this?
It works with dialogue. It works with a conversation.
Just conversation, right? So if you just have two people sitting at a table, and you're like, how do I get from the beginning of this scene to the climactic end of this scene in a way that's interesting and keeps it fresh and unexpected the whole time? It's like you can say, start the scene this way, and then just write blank on a page, good news, bad news, good news, bad news, good news, bad news, and brainstorm how to get there that way. It's going to be really entertaining. And we found when we've tracked this, we did Solo, we did Raiders of the Lost Ark, I think we did Ninja Turtles. I want to say we did this with Ninja Turtles.
Jamie's favorite, yeah.
Jamie's favorite.
Our most downloaded episode.
Jamie, have you sold that Ninja Turtles issue 2 out of your garage yet?
I haven't put it online yet, but I'm planning to. I found it. I'm getting ready.
Hell yeah. Stay tuned for that. So I broke down, I did my book report here, and I broke down the Avalanche prison break sequence to see if it tracks, right? To see, because for me, when I was watching the movie, I was thinking, like, I was trying to pull out lessons for this episode, And that one, I was like, I think this does it. Like, it just feels like good, bad. Okay, so here we go. I'll do this as fast as possible with my Micro Machines voice. The good news is Alexei finds the earpiece hidden in the Red Guardian action figure and gets instructions from Natasha and Yelena on how to escape. The bad news is Alexei attacks the guards and makes a scene instead of just slipping out quietly. The good news is Alexei defeats the guards and heads for the escape route. The bad news is the prisoners see Alexei escaping and make a huge deal out of it and make a huge ruckus, and the guards are alerted to him escaping. The good news is Alexei manages to break through the prison exit doors, and he's outside and has a clear path in all directions. The bad news is the prisoners and the guards come outside right behind him and swarm him in all directions. The good news is Alexei uses his superpowers to climb the high prison gates all the way to the top and evades the guards swarming him. The bad news is a guard shows up right above him and stuns him with a stun baton, and he falls all the way back to the ground, and he's back where he started. The good news is Natasha uses a cable to drop down into the prison ground and help clear the way for Alexei to escape. The bad news is all the guards everywhere firing at Yelena in the helicopter, so she's in trouble. The good news is Yelena uses a rocket launcher to blow up the gun tower that's the main one causing her problems. The bad news is the explosion causes an avalanche. The good news is Yelena pilots Natasha hanging from a cable to swoop down and rescue Alexei from the oncoming avalanche. And we think everything is chill. But the bad news is they're out of gas and they calmly crash to the ground.
Right.
So as you can see, it works really well. It's really effective in making one sequence very exciting. And it's to a T, man. Like this one, they did it. And I was saying before we did the podcast, I wonder if it's scripted that way, or if it becomes that way in the editing room, but it makes for a really
either way,
exciting...
even if like the stunt coordinator came up with it, it's still a form of writing.
That's true.
Those guys are writers. They're just writing differently. You know,
that's a good way to put it. They're rewriting in the editing.
Yeah,
room.
power to stunt choreographers and stuntmen. They're also there's an art to what they do, and
absolutely.
When you're planning out a fight, you definitely do a good news, bad news technique.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah,
they're storytellers too.
Yeah, they are. They're totally storytellers. The next thing, this is perfect that you did that, Jimmy, because I only wrote down really one thing. And I think this goes into earlier, Jamie, you said how your brain went into overload when the whole face reveal thing and that plan part of it, and it kind of took you out of the movie. I like this action sequence, Jimmy. But yeah, I wrote down when mumbo jumbo is kind of needed here because this took me out of the movie. Even though the sequence was really good, the whole time I was like, wait, the Red Guardian can just literally punch through the wall of the prison and leave. And I was like, is that a writing problem, or am I just like talking about a movie? And I'm like, no, wait. I think there should be some level of planning here in presenting the Red Guardian and his captivity, right? Like you have to give us some. He's literally in with the other prisoners in a normal prison situation, right? He has all the superpowers of Captain America. And he can punch down the biggest giant prison door I've ever seen with his bare hands. I'm like, I don't understand how this is the first time this problem has ever come up. This
is diving a little bit more into movie criticism than screenwriting.
It is.
But
I know.
No, I'm not complaining about you. What I'm about to say, which I'm going to lump to it. But that whole prison sequence to me felt like it was this weirdly conceived section by itself that wasn't part of the movie at large. Like even their plan was silly. Let's fly a helicopter in and have him run out and we'll pick him up. That was weird. It just felt like kind of goofy. It felt like a goofy thing. Then they killed everybody in the prison, basically, in an avalanche, and they didn't care.
There was no worries about the collateral damage of the...
They literally killed like 1,000 people, and they were like, whatever.
We got the Red Guardian.
So it was very odd to me, the whole sequence.
The morals of it definitely affected me, but I think this also brings up the other problem. Now, before I say this, I want to say, to me, the Red Guardian is easily the best part of the movie. He's completely underutilized. David Harbour is amazing, and I hope to God we see him again. I want him to be an Avenger, honestly.
Yeah,
like
he's awesome.
I could watch this performance forever. But also, I'm like, the whole movie seems to completely ignore him and the circumstances surrounding him in a way that bothers me and takes me out of the movie. Like, they underwrite his whole situation there. They underwrite the fact that the characters seem not to care that he is powerful. Nobody seems to care that he has superpowers. I don't understand. Like, they don't talk about it or utilize it in any way. You know what I mean? Like, even in the end fight scenes, I'm like, does anyone want to mention the fact that this dude can punch through the side of a prison and he's as strong? You know what I mean? It's.
Well, I think, and I to your point about, I actually think there's material missing that they shot, because
there has to be.
Let's go back, and they show Milena and Lexa flying back up toward the sinking ship, you know.
Yeah.
And then the next time we see them, they're on the ground, like, just chilling. So, like, there must have been a big action sequence with them that just completely got cut.
On a show where we talk about it, the final edit being the script, I think there is definitely some editing of him out of the movie.
Probably, yeah.
Hey, because he probably wasn't as imperative in Natasha's story, let's be honest.
Right.
But it definitely took me out of it. And just from, I know we talked about mumbo jumbo in the past and how it can be eye-rollingly boring, but sometimes I think it's necessary.
I agree.
Like, you can't just have a guy that can do that be in normal captivity and not explain why 30 years have gone by before that dude tried anything. You got to give me something, or else it's a betrayal a little bit.
I mean, a simple patch probably could have been that he's tried a million times,
right?
Like all they have to say is, like, there's like literally 500 miles of snow in every direction, and like
it could have been 2 lines of dialogue,
like,
or something.
Yeah.
It's just,
I mean, even
that.
Like they talked about, he told the story about the frostbite, though I don't know if that was before he was a super soldier. He could have like been like, so they've clearly established that he can get frostbite even though he's a super soldier, so they could have done something with that. But
they could have done something. It's a small complaint.
You're rewriting the movie again.
No, but I'm not rewriting. I'm just saying it took me out of the movie, much like, the plan at the end and everything. Like, you gotta make sure people aren't questioning everything when you're writing these sequences.
And that's the danger of doing all these larger than life things that need explanation.
And speaking of the Red Guardian, who is easily the comic relief of the movie, we've talked about this before, comic obsessions with characters and what does that means.
Yeah, so in a comedy seminar from Robert McKee, he made an observation. This isn't something he came up with. It's just an observation he made that I learned there, that we've been tracking for like 3 years on this podcast, and we've seen it throughout genres, right? There's a comic obsession in Midsommar. One of the characters has it pops up in every genre, and in this one, it's a great example of basically the idea is, to the character themselves, their obsession is normal. Like, this is normal to them, and to everyone else, it's neurotic. It's extreme. And David Harbour's right, his obsession with Captain America and his glory days as the Red Guardian is like a great instructive example of how to use a comic obsession to make the character funny in any scenario, right? Like, he reunites with his daughters for the first time, and the first thing he asks them is, "Did Captain America talk about me?" In which
she even says, "You're going to ask about him, not me, not our lives, but him." Exactly. And it works on an extra level since Natasha's most closely related with Captain America out of all the other Avengers, right? Like, it has an extra level.
It's interwoven
to the obsession. It works like that. Yeah. I don't think any of the other characters really had that, did they?
No, but it was pretty obvious and easy to track. I like if there's something we can talk about that's easy, that's very instructive and easy to learn from. I feel like if you're trying to understand, like, what's a comic obsession, how do I use it? If you watch Black Widow and just watch David Harbour's or the Red Guardian's obsession with his glory days in Captain America, that's how you do a comic obsession, right?
And just characters like him, usually in general, have a litany of very, like, base obsessions, sex
Yeah.
and food. It's like always like, and he does express all those in the movie. Like,
Yeah.
He's very base in that way, and it works. It's a good writing technique.
Yeah.
I would think one way you could look at it is like what rules do they have to live by?
Yeah.
And maybe some of them they're not aware. This is where the blind part comes.
Yeah.
They're not aware of how weird those rules are.
Yeah.
So
He's not aware that Russia might not have the best interests of humanity at its core. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, to him, it's just Mother Russia, and that there's no question.
And they're the greatest. Yeah.
Right. He was fucked over by one guy, but his mission to be there for his country is completely without fault.
That's true. Yeah.
I think with that we've spoken about everything we wanted to, right, guys?
Yeah, definitely.
Right? Like, and we all I think we all agree too that, problems aside, we enjoyed this movie.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah,
I know it's been
liked
shown,
it.
but
it definitely wasn't boring.
If I'm ranking it on the woman superhero movies, I would put it number 2 to Wonder Woman for me personally. We haven't got that many to choose from, which sucks and is bullshit. But
yeah. I still like Captain Marvel slightly more if we're just talking MCU.
Gotcha.
And I think this is a better made movie than Captain Marvel, but Captain Marvel deals with the premise. Captain Marvel deals with more interesting, fun things I like. But yeah, we need more examples now. Like, please.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Looking forward to She-Hulk and all that stuff.
Yes. Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that's everything, guys.
Yeah.
I know.
Did you learn anything, guys?
I'm trying to wrap my head around the television aspect of it. Like, honestly, it's a question I wrestle with a lot: is what's a television show versus what's a movie? Because I think, just like Bob said, if you can do Loki as a television show, then anything that's a movie could be a television show. The question is, could anything that's a television show be a movie? And I don't think that's always the case. But this one's somehow instructive in that I think this one may have almost worked better as a television show. And I'm trying to wrap my head around why exactly. Maybe it's because it's trying to tell so many stories.
Yeah.
And if you have, that's always my thing with television, is it might span the same storyline, like the road might be the same, but it's telling many stories along that road. And I think that's what this one might be doing.
Well, there's the series arc, the episode arc, the scene arc.
Right.
Movies don't have the series arc; they only have the two.
Yep. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. As far as as far as what I think I learned from this movie, it's. I mean, as far as the script, I don't think much. But I think the lesson learned is do stuff right, and the first time when they're supposed to be made.
Oh, okay.
Because
just a reminder that this should have happened 10 years ago.
I mean, we could pick it apart, for another 4 hours, but in the end, I think all the problems from this movie stem from being made in 2019 and being released now. It's just not. It's not its time.
Yeah.
It's an apology movie, and it shows. Even though I did enjoy it.
Apology movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I enjoyed it too. I think I learned two things: that if you handle a prologue right, very strategically, it combined with writing the credit sequence as a story in your script, you can really plant all the seeds for the things that need fixing, and it could serve almost as your before world before the movie even begins, like the actual story of the movie itself. So this prologue is really, really impactful and really does a lot of the work of the movie in 16 minutes. So
another movie that, and I know we didn't review this movie, that has a similar kind of prologue that in some ways you could cut out, but it does some lifting, is Quiet Place 2. It has a similar.
I haven't seen it.
I agree. Yeah, it's good. I like it.
I will watch it. Well, with that, I'm going to say we'll see everybody next time when we do Space Jam versus A New Legacy. I know Jamie wants to watch both those movies.
Space Jam meets Roger Rabbit. That's what I
Oh man.
I mean, that's Muhammad Ali versus an innocent little kid. Come on, that's not a fair fight. Although we should do Roger Rabbit. I'm just gonna say that straight up.
Put it on the list.
Yeah, that's one that's got to be on the list. Yeah.
God,
We could do Space Jam, but I don't think it's gonna be a very good episode.
I don't think I've ever seen.
What did we learn from Space Jam? Put Bill Murray in your movie.
Yeah, Bill Murray.
I don't think I've ever seen Space Jam. I think that's another one of those movies I skipped. And I'm a huge Michael Jordan fan. Like I grew up like idolizing Michael Jordan, but I skipped Space Jam.
I don't think it'll have much value for you, but if you did watch it, it proves that Bill Murray makes everything better.
Yeah.
More than anything. Bill Murray is kind of the champion of that movie. So, all right, we're just talking about Space Jam. This has nothing to do with that.
Anyway.
Yeah, good episode, guys. And
thanks for listening, guys.
Yep.
Yeah, thanks.
You have just listened to Writers Blockbusters, a screenwriting podcast featuring two professionals and another guy. Available only on Thundergrunt.